recorder, and it's time for another Monday moment break. Sitting here with my tea. It's an energy tea. I need the energy to keep going for the rest of the day. I've been thinking, last week I talked about watching the Ed Sullivan Show and the man with the spinning plates, and how so many times I feel like that's what I'm doing, trying to keep all those plates spinning. Well, I heard another story. Maybe this might relate a little better. You may have even heard it. Stephen Covey tells this story about a seminar he attended where the speaker brought out a wide-mouthed jar. And next to it, he had a platter of some big rocks. And he asked, how many of these rocks do you think we can get in this jar? The different students made guesses. He said, okay, well, let's find out. And he took one rock at a time and placed them into the jar. Now, when it got to where it was obvious that no more rocks could fit, he said, is the jar full? The students, all in unison, yes. Not so fast, he cautioned. Then he reached under the table and he brought out a bucket of gravel. And he dumped it into the jar, shook it and dumped in some more. The gravel slid into all the little spaces that was left by the big rocks. Now, the speaker asked, is the jar full? Students know there's something going on, so they responded, probably not. Good, he said. He reached under the table and he brought out a bucket of sand and he started dumping the sand into this jar. And while the students watched, the sand filled all the little spaces left between the rocks and the gravel. Once more, he looked up and he said, now is the jar full? The students saw, no. Good, he said. Then he grabbed a pitcher of water and he began to pour it into the jar. He got, maybe a quart or so of water into the jar before he said, ladies and gentlemen, the jar is now full. Then he asked, can anyone tell me the lesson that you can learn from this? What's my point? Well, some of the responses were, there are always gaps in your schedule, and if you really work at it, you can find ways to fit more into your life. No, that's not the point. You see, the point is that if I had not put the big rocks in first, I would have never gotten them in. In both our business and personal lives, we have big rocks, gravel, sand, and water. Now, the natural tendency seems to be to favor the last three elements, leaving little space for the big rocks. The big rocks are our priorities. What are your big rocks? When I'm working with coaching people, a lot of times there's a couple of different visuals that we use. Now, some will take actual big rocks and write their priorities, the things that are most important to them in their lives. And they'll keep these rocks to remind them of that. Some have gone so far as to put those big rocks into a jar. I also have created handouts that we sometimes use with images of big rocks, of gravel, sand, and water. And they've written down on each one what they are. So there's a visual replication, something to have in front of them to remind them. How do you remind yourself? What are your big rocks? And how do you make them a priority? My challenge to you this week, take a look at those big rocks. What visual can you use to remind yourself? And then when you've taken care of the big rocks, worked around the sand, gravel, and water. Sit back, relax, and enjoy some tea. Until next time, I hope that you have a very terrific